Greetings everybody, it's Jim. If you couldn't tell from the thumbnail and from the t-shirt, I'm going to be talking about a game that you've definitely seen being played at conventions all across America and probably the world. And the thing about this game is it's got a cult following. I wouldn't say it's huge, but the people that play it just absolutely love it. They are going to play it at every convention they can. And there's a reason for that, because it can tend to be a pretty long game. And a convention, much like games like Twilight Imperium, are one of the only places you're actually going to be able to sit down and play a game like this. Now, that being said, it's actually a quite nice two-player game as well. And that actually, for the most part, I almost think that's the better way to play. I'll get into more why in a little bit, because this game, when you look at it, definitely looks like a more the merrier game. But there's trade-offs on that, and you got to have a lot of patience to want to play it. But there's a lot of reasons why you would want to. Enough ado, let's go to it. I'm going to be telling you why you should be playing Titan from Avalon Hill. Now, I know I haven't done a video in a little while here, but there's a reason for it, because I've been a busy boy. Columbia Games has got Napoleon the Enhanced Edition, if you're familiar with how they upgraded Rommel in the Desert, Julius Caesar, Quebec 1759. That's out on Kickstarter right now. It's a beautiful rendition of a classic game. And of course, Avalon Digital has Wars Across the World. It's the PC game that was like a universal rule set for battling any war. They got over 66 downloadable content for different scenarios from all time eras, and now they're doing it in a physical board game version, so you want to check that out down in the link down below as well. And then of course you've got yours truly here at Power Cell Games with 6x6 Tales, the sequel, Time of Giants, which is doing terrific. It's a solo fantasy adventure, costs $3, really easy to check it out. I really hope you do. All three links are down below. So let me give you a quick synopsis of the game. Basically, you're going to have your forces called legions that are going to go across this wild-looking board representing all types of terrain types. And what you're going to do is one of two things. One, you're going to recruit other monsters to join your legions. And another one is, of course, attacking and defending from attack from the opponent's forces. And when one of the coolest things about this is when you attack, you go from the terrain that you were onto a specialized battle board on that terrain. Really cool. I'll get into it. But when you defeat an opponent, you get a number of experience points, or just plain points, really, based on the defenders that you defeat on the battlefield. The stronger the force, the more points you get. Of course, if you lose, the opponent gets the points. So there's a lot of strategy involved that we'll talk about, more than just, I got to have the bigger force all the time, because sometimes that's not how it works out. Sometimes you have to attack with a lesser force to prevent them from getting more forces and bigger forces. So short-term losses, but for long-term gains. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Alright, so let's talk about recruiting creatures. You start off the game with 2 ogres, 2 centaurs, and 2 gargoyles. As you can see on the mustard progression diagram, they are all the way at the bottom, okay? They are your baseline creatures, and anytime you land on the main map on a tower, you can always be rest assured that you can pick one of those and get a creature. You can't always get a creature no matter where you land, and we're going to find out why in a second. Now, the thing is, each one of these, as you can see, I'm going to move this up here a little bit, they have lines that go to other creatures. Like the ogre can go to a troll or a minotaur, a centaur can go to a warbear or a lion, and a gargoyle goes to a cyclops. Now the thing is, as you can see along those lines, like going back to the ogre example, if they go to the troll, it says marsh. So when you land on a marsh, if you have 2 or 3 ogres, then you can get a troll. It's different for every one of them. Usually it's just 2 to 3, okay? And of course, if you have 2 ogres, you can instead get a minotaur if you land on the hills. And of course, everyone's a little bit different, all right? Now, unlike Pokemon, you don't have to sacrifice your original creatures to get to the newest one. These come along with you. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And of course, it progresses even more. If you end up with 2 trolls, as you can see here, there's 3 other creatures that you can recruit once you get 2 trolls. Yeah, or 2 or 3 trolls. Go along the swamp, you can get a wyvern, sorry, a war bear in the tundra, and if you go keep on the marsh, you'll get a ranger if you get 2 trolls. And of course, it keeps on keeping on for the ogre and the centaur, all the way up to a colossus, which is very powerful indeed. These get a little bit more powerful each time, whether it be a combat stat, movement, or some kind of special ability. And the thing is, the gargoyle kind of has its own tree, and it's very small. But yet, at the same time, there's probably something to that of why these are. I think it's special abilities, or it's just they're a little bit harder to get. But at the same time, the Colossus is probably the hardest to get because, as we'll talk about strategy here in the game, trying to progress and your opponent knowing what you have, they're going to want to attack you while you're weak, or at least kill one of your creatures so you can't have 2, because once you get 2, you usually can recruit something else, right? So there's some strategy in there that's pretty cool. But that's how you recruit more monsters. All right, so let's talk about recruiting creatures real quick here. Now, you start the game with 2 ogres, 2 centaurs, and 2 gargoyles. Now, as you can see on the mustard progression diagram on the right-hand side, they are at the very bottom of that progression chart, right? Now, as you land on other spaces, you can get other creatures depending on if you have the minimum number required of the other creatures. Now, when it comes to ogres, centaurs, and gargoyles, if you are on a tower space, you are always guaranteed to get 1 of those baseline creatures, the ogre, the centaur, and the gargoyle. Now, if you go to other places, it turns a little different. So let's take the mustard diagram off here, and let's move on downward. And then we can see that if you are on a brush and you have 2 gargoyles, then you can get 1 of the next one up, which is a cyclops. And if you get 2 cyclops, then you can get a gorgon. And it works the same with all these other ones. It's usually 2 or 3 of one creature to get up to the next one. And of course, this makes for some interesting battles that I'll talk to you later on. So I wanted to look through this mustard progression diagram with you a little bit. Now, as you can see here, you can go all the way up to the Colossus, which is the granddaddy of all of them in the game, and everything else is can usually progress somewhere higher, but there are a few of them that actually stop progression. You can't go any further once you get them, such as the Ranger, the Unicorn, and the Hydra, and they're in the same row as the Colossus there. And as you can see, once you get one of those, they don't go any further. And notice also that the Gargoyle row on the right-hand side, it's its own little tree in general, okay? And the most you're going to be able to get is the Serpent, which is very powerful. It's got poison ability. But the thing is, even if these other ones cut off, it's not like, and they can't evolve any further, it's not like you're going to say, no, I don't want that, because if you can land on a space, if you can land on that one and land on another one, yeah, you got a decision to make. But for the most part in this game, sometimes it's just obvious that this is the only thing you can get, so you take the Hydra, even if you can't progress anymore. It's powerful enough, and it's better than nothing. All right, so let's talk about legions and stacking in the game, okay? Now, this is the player token called a Titan, and of course, everybody has one of those, and if you lose it, you lose the game. It starts with a power, and by the way, the numbers on these tiles, on the left is the power of combat, and the number on the right is the movement. Okay, then we'll get into that later. But if you lose your Titan, you lose the game, so you really got to protect it at all times. Now, the thing is, of course, this is the brown Titan. Here's the Legion markers, and there's 6 of them here, but there's 12 of them in all. Basically, these represent the legions as they go across the board, and the idea is you put them on top of your forces so your opponent can't see what you have underneath. And that's pretty important. Now, the only time you have to declare what you have is when you're recruiting another monster to prove that you have the amount of creatures to recruit the other ones. Now, if you have more than 7 creatures in a stack, or you just wish to do so anyway, what you do is you split them up into other legions and split them up across the board. And of course, there's reasons to do this. You are forced to do it if you have more than 7 in a stack. But sometimes you just want to try to, your opponent is. Sometimes you get more movement out of other legions. Having them being able to go across the board and can recruit a little faster might make them a little weaker, but that's the risk that you take. So that is the idea behind stacking and legions. All right, so let's talk about my favorite part of the game that just made my mind go crazy thinking that this was a great game, and that is combat. So basically, like any other game, if you land on your opponent's spot, you're going to have combat. Now, instead of taking all the combat values and just doing a one die roll resolution, this one goes to a different level of scale. So what happens is when you're going to take, depending on the terrain that the opponent is on, you're going to go to a separate battle board. Now here we have the jungle battle board, right? So all kinds of terrain there. Let me show you another one. Let me show you the woods that we're about to go into. And this will show up the woods diagram. And the thing about this is that this part here is considered the top, and this part here is considered the bottom. And if you notice the entire shape of all the hexes, it actually represents the way that these are shaped. So here we have, we'll take that out for the woods here. I am coming in with my forces in this direction. And since this is the top, when I go over to the battle board, and that is the top, that means I'm coming in from this side. And that means the opponent has to come in from the opposite end, this side, okay, on the sides of the threes. That's how that goes, with the exception of the tower, where they would actually, there's a tower in the middle here, and they would actually set up in the tower. Now, all right, so let's talk about combat, and it's actually got some nice little nuances. It's a straightforward combat system, but it's got little tweaks to it that really make it not dry whatsoever. Now, earlier I did say that the number on the right, or our number on the left was the power factor, and it is. The number on the right is the skill factor, not the movement factor, even though it is used for movement. That's how many hexes they can go. But it's also the skill factor, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, the thing is, it's a winner-take-all proposition. The attacker has to eliminate the defender within 7 turns, or the defender wins. And the winner gets the amount of points equal to the power factor of each opponent's forces, okay? Now, the thing is, when you defeat a creature in this game, they don't go back into the pool and just for where all the counters are, or the bank. They actually get out of play because there is a limited number of creatures in the game. Like the unicorns, there's only 12 of them. The hydras, there's only 10 of them, and so on and so on. It's meant to make the game go, end quicker, in case you get really, really going for a long time, which this game can do. Now, the thing is, the defender always goes first, so we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say, and then 1, 2, because that's their movement factor, right? It's equal to the number on the right. Now, you have to move each one individually, because if you make a mistake, you lose it. Basically, let's say I move the ogre and the centaur here, and now my ogre can't get out. It's locked by a tree, and so it's gone. Okay, so you really got to pay attention in this game. And after a long game, you might make those mistakes. I've made them before. I'm an experienced player, but I'm like, you're not paying attention. All of a sudden, now you've lost a major part of your opponent or your game. Now, when you start moving guys around the board, you can move right past another one. If you haven't fought it yet, I can go right past this guy if I really wanted to. But the thing is, once you start fighting and engage, then those two are locked. Now, they don't have a marker, which they should have had, to say that these two creatures are engaged, because you just got to remember it. Now, when you're attacking, roll a number of dice equal to your power level. So if the centaur was attacking this behemoth, it would roll 3 dice, and it has a skill level of 4 against the behemoth skill level of 3. And so we just go down here, attacker skill level is 4, behemoth skill level 3. They need 3s or more on their dice to hit. All right, and as they hit, that goes against their power level. That's their hit points, basically, and you keep track of that, and that means immediately they roll less dice as they hit you. Okay, really nice combat system, very simple. There are a few extra things in here, and let's go over that right now. Now, both the attacker and defender can actually add to their forces for reinforcements during the battle. If the attacker doesn't feel like their troops are doing as well as they should, they can actually take one of their angels, which you start with 1 during the game, and you can actually get more than 1 in your forces. But the thing is, once per turn, not once per battle, just once per turn, no matter how many battles you have to resolve, you could take one of your angels from another legion and fly them over to the current battle. Okay, so that's nice. Now, it's not like the defenders without their benefits, though. Because on turn 4, if the defender could have recruited somebody with the amount of forces they started with, they will get a defender the counter that they would have recruited. So in this case, there's 3 centaurs, right? And they're in the woods. So we go over here and we look at woods. And if you have 3 centaurs, you get a warbear. Now, that's normally what they would do on their turn. But here, they just get an extra warbear on turn 4. And it just comes right on over when that starts. So that's an extra nice little benefit. Now, the thing is, if you would have landed on that as the defender and then you would have had a warbear already, it's nice that it's something that the attackers got to think about is, boy, they just got a warbear. If I attack them, they're going to get another one. So you really got to make sure that you have enough forces to make an attack. What I like about the battle boards also is each one has about maybe maximum 2 hazards on it, so they're easy to learn and get an idea of what's going on without being totally overwhelmed with 20,000 different types of terrain hazards. Let's talk about the most bittersweet part of this game, and it is the map and movement, okay? So because you're looking at this map here, and you're looking at all these symbols on the hex sides of these maps, each one of them means something different, and I thought this would make for a lot of chaotic planning and everything, trying to make it harder to attack somebody, because one of the things that I noticed right away, that it can't be like a regular map board. Otherwise, you would just have, everybody would section them off on parts of the map, and you'd almost have countries, right? And you'd be playing your standard war game. So it couldn't be something like that. However, the idea, there's an impression that I got from it that it would be a lot of randomness involved and a lot of choices to make, more than even randomness. However, it's really not that random, and there's not that many choices. So let's go over how this is, okay? So first off, on each legion on your turn rolls a die and moves. You do 1 legion at a time, okay? And again, as I mentioned earlier, that's one of the reasons why you might want to break up your legions, is because now you can move more and you can recruit more, right? And get your forces faster. Of course, they're going to be a little weaker. Anyway, when you're moving your guy, you see this symbol here. This is an arrow, okay? Simple enough. And it only shows up on the tower, okay? So it just means if you start your move on the tower, you can go into any of the directions that these arrows point. In this case, all 3 of them, and that's the way they all do. So let's say I rolled a 1 and I just moved in here, that would be the end of the turn. Now, the next turn I'm here, and you see this is an arch. It just means that you may move in that direction if you start there on your turn, okay? So I can definitely move back to the tower if I rolled another 1, let's say. Now these triple arrows, since I'm here, I'll mention these. It means the same thing as an arrow. If you start your turn on this spot, you can go in that direction. So in other words, notice here that in this, if I start here, I can move through this arch, or I can move through these triple arrows in this direction, but I can't go towards the hills because they're pointing in towards me. Okay, so I only got 2 spaces to go, which is generally the consensus of what happens here. With the exception of the towers and the tundras, generally you're only going to get 2 choices of directions to go. Now you might be thinking, well, Jim, when you move to this one, when you move to another spot, don't you have a lot of choices, like I can move this way, I can move this way, I can move this way? No, because the triple arrows mean also something else. As much as it means if you start in this hex, you can go in this direction, it also means if you continue moving, if you've moved into a hex and can continue moving, let's say I rolled a 2 instead of a 1, it means I must go in that direction. So in other words, I go here, and to continue moving, I can't go this way, and I can't go back. I have to actually follow the path of the triple arrows. So as you can see, the triple arrows, and it keeps on going. So if I rolled a 5 starting here, I'd start with the arrows here if I wanted to, but then I'm stuck going, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I follow the triple arrows all the way. So that if I'm choosing to go this way into the woods, I'm ending up here. I can't go into any other branches out. That's the part that I'm saying is on rails. The only other way to go, if I was on the brush and I rolled a 5, would be going down here, 1. Then I get the most choices that I actually get, and it would be either go to the plains or the tower, and then 2. But as soon as I land into one of those, I'm going on rails. So that would be 1, 2, Come on, there you go. 3, 4, and 5 under this planes right here, following those arrows. So that's the thing that's in the game. It seems like in the game there are. It really feels like Parcheesi, quite honestly, the way this is, because that's what the game really ends up being. You're chasing people. The only difference is you can choose to go in the clockwise or counterclockwise direction on this for the most part. In the middle, once you get in the outside, once you go onto the outside loop, they call it. Aficionados that know, you can see that you can really you are moving along this whole thing unless you end a turn here and you want to get off of it, and then you go through an arch. Now the last one to talk about is the block, and all that just means is if you start here and you see this, it means you just can't go that way. It might as well be like this one, which is triplers, where I can't go this way either. So this, for this spot, I only have one way to move. So whether I roll a 1 or a 6, I'm following this path. That's just the way that's going to go. So in the end, if you look at it, there's some people that really know how to play the game. They say that there's 3 loops. There's the inner loop with the tundra and the mountains and such. There's the middle loop, which gives you the most choice of movement, and it's still not much. And then the outer loop, where you're really just going in a clockwise direction, period. Okay, so in a way, that's the part where it gets a little melancholy, because you find out that you're chasing people all over the place and you're not really making maneuvers to really catch them, and it really comes down to a little bit of luck of the die. But people have come up with some pretty interesting ways to also alleviate people chasing them, which is an interesting strategy. So if you're chasing a guy around the outer loop, let's say, and he's got a stack of 7, but he doesn't want to be attacked, he can split into another legion of just one guy, and then you have to contend with it. So if you were about to catch up and then he drops a guy, you have to contend with that guy, and that gives him another turn to get away. So it's just little interesting things here, but it also makes the game a little bit longer, in my opinion, from what I've seen anyway. But it's like I said, it's bittersweet. I understand why they do it, though, because any other way, as I think I mentioned earlier, it would just turn into a regular war game with countries and everybody shutting them off. This does allow for a little bit of luck to figure into the game, and this is the part where the more the merrier would come into, because you got 6 people all around, not too much room to move, and you're going to bump into people. You're going to be attacking people you don't even want to attack in a 6-player game when you just bump into them, because every legion's got I think they have to move, if I recall correctly. They have to roll the die and move. So the only on average, though, you can only move in 1 or 2 directions, usually at most, maybe 3 if you're around the tundra and the towers. All right, so my version of this game says for ages 8 and up. Now, that's probably somewhat true if you got some smart kids and stuff like that, but don't expect them to read the rule book and figure it out. I mean, I believe that people can learn Steve Jackson's The Fantasy Trip role-playing game and their battle system, but it's not something you're going to read. This book is written in Wargamerese, and so some 8-year-old is not going to read this. It's kind of crazy. Now, one thing I really like is the counters in this game. As you've seen the artwork already when I was showing you, these are really nice counters too. This is made by Avalon Hill, and it was made to really be impressive, so you don't have to worry about the corners or anything like that. These punched out really well, these pieces, and I like this version. There is a newer version that has some updated graphics, but I got to admit, much like I think about a lot of these games, and you've probably heard me say this before, the games they get too graphical for their own good. It's like some guy got a whole bunch of paint toys on Photoshop and says, I must use these gradients, I must use all these colors, and it ends up making everything blotchy and uncoordinated, and you can't see what's going on. These are very simple. I always like the idea of the silhouettes and just the basic color schemes. It's really nice. But overall, is this game a multiplayer game, or is it a better 2-player game? I have to admit, a 2-player game is going to be good. Okay, because you're going to battle each other and you're going to always be involved. That's the problem with the multiplayer game. As you get more people, you're playing these battles, and as small as they are and as simple as the game is, you know, going through those each time and setting it up and rolling the dice and playing a few turns, it's going to be a few minutes before you get to and multiple battles on a turn on top of it. Some other player is going to be waiting possibly in a 6-player game half an hour even to get to their turn. So unless they get involved in the battle. So that's where the game can get really kind of long. So that's why I can understand if somebody wanting to play an epic version of Titan is going to play it at a convention. I probably wouldn't say, unless I'm playing solo, ever going to get that kind of play out of the game. Now the game is won, by the way, you know, when a number of turns are, a number of points are reached, or the other opponent's Titans are all eliminated. But also, but to make the game quicker, I've thought of a few things, and they're pretty simple. They obviously talk about having a time limit in the game. I would like to do something a little bit more different than the time limit. Like, I would have a time limit, but it would be early in the game. And it would be like a gong or something like that, you know, after 10, 12 turns of everybody getting set. And then saying, okay, we're going to end the turn like some kind of super sudden death thing where every turn we're going to roll, 2 dice. And on a 3 or less, the game's going to go into its final stage. And you add one at the end of each turn. So, and because at the beginning of the game goes pretty fast because you only got one legion to move, maybe two if you feel like splitting up early. But basically it goes pretty fast. As you gain more legion, that of course changes. But when you finally roll a 3 or less on 2 dice, and of course, like I said, it increases 1 each turn. When you finally get that threshold, when you finally get that final stage, then you roll a 1d6 and say, okay, the game is going to, or 2d6 maybe, and you say, okay, the game is going to end in this many turns. So nobody really gets an idea of when it's going to end. So the first part, you know, you get a few definite turns, but then when that clock runs down, then you got so many turns to make your final preparations. Then the final spot is when you're really thinking the game is going to end. Or you could actually do a sudden death thing where you just roll those 2d6 and then the game, instead of going to that final stage, it just ends, you know. So you never can be sure when it's going to end. I would do things like that to make the game a little bit more interesting and maybe, you know, cut it down to the wire. And of course, you can make the game faster. The only thing is, by making it faster, will you ever get to play with the behemoths? So that might be a tough thing on that. Another thing you could possibly do is maybe make, instead of some of the monsters say you need 3 of these to get one of these, maybe just make sure they can do that with 2, perhaps, or something like that. Or maybe even spend some of your experience points, and, you know, because that is your main goal, is to get points. Spend some of those experience points to buy creatures and say, look, I'm banking in on myself, or I need help. I'm going to buy a behemoth, and maybe, you know, that'll, I don't know how much I would say that would cost. Probably 3 times as much points as you get for defeating one. So if a behemoth's like 10 power points, it's going to cost you 30 experience points to buy. And that might add some things to the game, like somebody's their last shot, or they're almost dead. It's like, okay, I'm just going to spend them all, get 3 behemoths, and go to town against somebody. Of course, there's a lot of politics that could happen in this game, saying, hey, you leave me alone, and, you know, I'll concede all my battles, because you do have to battle people that you land on. And like I said, you only got 1 or 2 choices. Sometimes you're just going to land on somebody no matter what, but you can agree to just concede, give them the points, and then move on. So there's a little bit of politics in a multiplayer game in this. Overall, guys, I really like this game. I wonder about a lot of the variables that you could add to it. I know a lot of people have already done that. There's a lot of expansions, people doing their own rules and such. Is definitely house rulable. Definitely a game to get. There's a newer version out. It probably costs a lot less than this version. But the thing is, I think if you wanted a kid to get into wargaming, this would be a great game to do it with. Definitely play at 2 players with them, though, because you don't want to get the kids bored by getting, 6 people involved. So play a 2-player game with that, and I think they'd have fun. So anyway, guys, that's a lot of venting about this game of Titan, because I really went up and down on it, and I'll see you next video.